Here we have some problems that have to do with what they call the properties of real numbers. And these things have fancy names: reflexive, symmetric, commutative, associative. But really, mostly what these are, uh, they're just facts that you probably already know. And some of them you just know intuitively about how numbers work. Look at their reflexive property, for example. This property, this fancy named property, says x equals x. X is the same thing as X. Well, that just seems so obvious. Why would you even write it down? Well, that's what math teachers do sometimes. And in this assignment, we've got some real life equations here or examples, and then we have to match them to the right property. But these are things that you'd never really do. I mean, it's obvious to you probably what all of these are, and we just have to find the right name. What I've done is grabbed myself a list of properties, and I would suggest that you do the same thing if you get an assignment like this, and just try to match them rather than trying to memorize all of these different fancy names. Let's see how this works. We'll see if we can do this. The first question here says, what property is illustrated by the fact that 18 times 14, in parentheses, times 69 equals 18 times, in parentheses, 14 times 69. So I guess what they've done here is they've just grouped these numbers differently with the parentheses, put them in a little different order. But when you multiply three numbers, it doesn't matter what order you put them in, it's still going to be the same. So let's see if we can find something in our list that looks like that. Yeah, so if you look down here, we have A times parentheses B times C is the same thing as parentheses AB times C. So they've just changed the order in the parentheses. That's exactly what's happening up here. So this is an example of the associative property. In this case, it's the associative property of multiplication. So there'll be an example often for addition and one for multiplication. So let's just draw an arrow, and we'll make a note, the associative property of multiplication. All right, let's look at the next one. It says, what property is illustrated by the fact that 76 plus 93 equals 93 plus 76? You've known this since you were probably very little. It doesn't matter what order you put two numbers in when you add them. So, oh yeah, here we go. In the commutative property, it says A plus B equals B plus A. So this is the commutative property of addition. So let's draw a line there, and we'll make a note that it's of addition. All right. Next one says, what property is illustrated by the fact that z times 1 equals z? Well, you've known that for a long time too. Anything times 1 stays itself. And this is actually called the identity property. There's two of them. There's one for multiplication, which is what we're seeing here. Z times 1 equals Z. And here we have an example, 1 times 7 equals 7. So multiplying something by 1, it's staying itself. So that's the property for multiplication. For addition, the same property is just anything plus 0 stays itself. So this is the identity property of multiplication. And let's try one more here. This last one says, which property is illustrated by the following statement: b plus a negative b equals 0. So they're taking a number and they're adding the opposite of that number to it, and it comes out to be 0. This is called the inverse property. So you can think of negative b being the inverse of b. And when you do that for addition, which is what we're doing here, you get a result of 0. The multiplication property for the inverse looks a little bit different. It says if you take x, or some number, and you multiply it by 1 over that number, you get 1. So both of those are examples of the inverse property. This one we have is the inverse property of addition. So this is a strategy I'd recommend if you have an assignment like this. Just get a list from a textbook or online and see if you can do some matching.